Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and to this short time-lapse version of a little water ripple study in soft pastel. If you enjoy this, then please do hit subscribe here on YouTube, and if you're interested in working along with me in real time, check me out over on Patreon where you'll find my full catalogue of real-time tutorials. After being asked by several of my patrons to have a look at some water demos, I decided to create some mini demos. The first one here, as you can see, quite glassy looking ripples with some evening sunshine setting on the top of them. So lots of light and shade, a few twinkles down the right side of the painting hopefully. I decided to keep it small, as the name would suggest. These mini demos are geared towards a rainy afternoon. You can produce all of these mini demos in one sitting, so most of them are between 1 to 4 hours long. And this one is on pastel matte paper. I've used the buttercup yellow colour, as I thought that made a pretty good underline tone for all of the lighter highlights on the water. So I like to use a paper that's going to tone with what's going on in the painting. And I'm using a very limited palette this time. Just 5 pastels involved, and that's including just a little bit of black to darken a few areas in the darkest ripples. So I really wanted to challenge myself and see could I produce this with just a tiny handful of pastels. And of course that's great news for you if you're a beginner and you don't have many pastels. It's always great to see how much you can do with a very limited number. So lots and lots of blending in this piece. I really wanted the surface of the water to look as smooth and glassy as it does in the photo reference. So you'll find many different textures within water, and it really depends on the type of water that you're painting. Water with a bit more movement like this tends to give you a lot of light and shade because some of the ripples are facing away from the light and some are really catching the light, so you get a very much almost a two-tone effect when you're at a distance from this. And I've also brought in some warm colours, this light peachy tone from Unison, and it works really nicely against the cooler blue violets that I've also used. So I've used a dark navy from Terry Ludwig, and one of my favourites, Grey 8 from Unison. And then just a couple of lighter tones. And as you'll see in just a while, a little bit of an orange tone to add some warm glow around the brightest areas. But a very limited palette. And the piece is only 8 inches square. So there's really a limit as to how much detail I can add. And for me, it was much easier actually to start at the bottom of this painting. Normally, I tend to work from the top downwards. But in this case, the ripples at the bottom of the painting were a lot more simple, easier for me to start to get a feel for those ripples. Whereas the ones towards the top, they're getting further away from us within the perspective. And so they're kind of layering up more densely towards the top of the painting. So I talk a lot in this piece about moving around the painting so as to not start to rush. Once I start to lose my focus a little bit in one area, I will just move to another part of the painting and get a bit of work done there. So to me, it's no big deal if I lose my focus a bit, if I start to get a bit overwhelmed because there's so many different layers and textures in quite a small area. And my plan with this piece was to not really bother with any pastel pencil. And of course, for a smaller painting, the bigger sticks are quite blunt instruments to use. But I wanted to see if it would be possible to get to a reasonably detailed version of my photo reference. Of course, I'm not too bothered if it's exactly like the photo reference. When you're painting something like water, so it's not a portrait, it doesn't have to have an exact likeness. You can simplify things, you can take a little bit of artistic license here and there. But you can see that I'm pretty much following the shapes that I can see in the photo reference. I'm trying to follow it as best as I can at this scale of 8 inches. And of course, the details become trickier and trickier the further up the painting I go. So you can just see me there breaking a pastel in half. That gives me a few extra edges to use. So still some gaps in the paper. I haven't quite filled in the whole piece yet with a first layer of colour, but it's getting there now. And I often describe the feeling of trying to piece together something that's very complicated yet almost abstract. Sometimes it feels like I'm piecing together a jigsaw puzzle. And if I can just get the bigger, more obvious shapes placed first, usually all of those other areas will click into place as I progress. So you can see towards the top of the painting, I still haven't quite mapped out where everything goes. And at this stage, I'm realizing that I'm going to have to simplify what I can see up there for sure. Unless I pick up some pastel pencils, then I could create some finer details towards the top of the painting. So this little piece took me just over 3 hours and was a lot of fun to complete. Quite nice to sit down at a smaller painting, especially just after painting something bigger and more complicated. So I will continue with a few more water demos. It's quite an enjoyable thing to paint. And although I haven't painted much water like this just by itself, water ripples in particular have featured in many of my paintings, especially my pet portraits. Many a portrait that was set at the beach or at a river where the dog is splashing in the water. So I've painted ripples many times before, and quite often as part of an animal portrait. But this was fun to just hone in on one little section of the water. And now I'm back working at this top left section. What I'm trying to do is to just make some of the main darker ripples a little bit more prominent and to lighten some of the areas in front of those ripples. So just here where I'm working over to the left side of the painting. Finally getting the last bit of blank paper covered in. And now I can just start to work on a few details, minor adjustments. And then of course we've got the bright twinkly bits to go down the right side. So I start to bring some of my brightest value in, creeping over from the right side of the painting, bringing some of those brightest highlights over towards the left side, but making sure that I save most of my brightest value for the right side, and in particular, these twinkly bits. So you can see before I bring in my brightest value, I'm coming in with the orange colour. I'm adding some little rays of light around the edges of those starburst shapes. So bringing a touch of warmth right down this side. And then filtering some of that brighter light across the surface of the ripples. So I could have spent much longer at this. I could have worked on quite a bit more on the ripples towards the top of the piece. As I said, the ones at the bottom were much more simple to capture. But for the purposes of this little demo, where I just really wanted to show what's possible with a very limited palette and even on a small scale like this. Such a fantastic medium for painting water, surprisingly, because it's a dry medium. But you can just blend so beautifully with soft pastel. You can make really beautiful textured marks, or you can mix and blend something until it is glassy and smooth. And it's that versatility with soft pastel that I really love. So I hope that you've enjoyed seeing this come together. I really enjoyed working on this, and I'm going to continue the theme with a few little water demos of different types of water. Have you got any suggestions? Waterfalls, rivers, waves, what else? So if you did enjoy this here, please do remember to hit subscribe. But thanks very much for watching this here, and until next time, happy pasteling.